All right, hello everyone. Welcome to a bonus episode of Why Do You Expert Like That? I have no idea what number episode this is because I am not that far thinking ahead, but we have the wonderful Caylin Dickson from Pēpi Parent, who is an incredible sleep specialist expert. What do you call yourself, Caylin?
I call myself a holistic sleep consultant.
Oh, very flash. So what I will actually do is just pass over to you if you want to do a little bit of an intro as if
Yeah,
as if
totally.
someone hasn't met you before.
Yeah. So my name's Caylin. I have a master's degree in psychology and a postgraduate diploma in family therapy. I've also got additional study in infant sleep support, actually sleep support for children aged 0 to 12, which people sometimes
Wow.
go, oh, that's weird. I am a mum of one. My daughter Claire turns 3 next week, and I have a lovely husband, Josh, who is looking after the terror downstairs at the moment.
Thank you, Josh.
But yeah, I created Pēpi Parent because when I had my daughter, she did not sleep. I mean, literally from the moment she was born, it was like she had this aversion to closing her eyes. And I also had quite bad postnatal depression and anxiety and found a lot of the noise around infant sleep really hard to deal with. I also found that as my sleep deprivation got worse, my mental health got worse. And it was this kind of
Funny how that
vicious
happens, eh?
cycle. I know, funny how it's a torture technique that people use.
Who would have guessed?
Who would have guessed? And so once I kind of emerged from the fog of early motherhood and had supports in place for myself, I decided to create a different kind of sleep support. I very much focus holistically on the family or whānau that I'm working with and believe that there's no one size fits all approach to infant sleep. I find when you have sleep, you often have a spectrum of sleep support. You have quite traditional sleep training down one end, like your traditional cry it out or FERBA. And then down the other end, you have very holistic, almost Eastern sleep practices at times where they have sayings such as breast is best, or they're heavy on the co-sleeping and things like that. And I don't believe that either camp is necessarily wrong. I think that there are good bits from both ends. And if we can take the scientific evidence-based parts of infant sleep, look at the family, the whānau, and the baby that we're working with, then we can kind of draw from both ends and create something in the middle, which is what Pēpi Parent is.
So good. So good. I remember when I first found you, I was sort of in the midst of figuring out, my son was at that age that we're going to talk about, that kind of 8-month age, where I was sort of figuring out what I wanted to do. He was kind of doing a bit of a regression thing. And I remember finding your page and being like, oh, it's someone who's telling me it's okay if I don't want to sleep train, and it's okay. You were just such a lovely, soft place to land. And so
Thank you.
that's okay. If you haven't come across Caylin's page, Pēpi Parent, even if you aren't able to engage in her services for whatever reasons, definitely give her a follow, because just the advice and the correction of misinformation and the kind of calming down of some of the heightened advice parents can get around particularly infant sleep, I think you just do such an amazing job at kind of calming everything down and bringing everyone back to nope, here's what we know, and you're very good at sort of dispelling all those sort of all the noise. Good at
It is noise. It's a lot of noise, and it's really hard, especially when you're vulnerable, especially when you're sleep deprived, and especially when you've got a young baby.
Yeah, 100%. So if you have never listened to a Why Do You Expert episode like this before, basically what it is that we get a parenting adjacent expert like the lovely Caylin, and we pick their very big brains and use it for our selfish purposes. Listeners have submitted questions to us, and Caylin and I have gone through and chosen 5, and we're going to answer them and put them out into the internet. So we will jump right into it. The first question we have today is from Liv, and she is asking, what is sleep pressure?
Sleep pressure is essentially your baby's drive to sleep, right? And you can think of it in terms of hunger too. The longer we go without eating, the hungrier we get. The longer we go without sleeping, the more tired we get, right? So sleep pressure is one of the most important aspects of baby sleep. And it's not only going to help your baby fall asleep, but it's going to help your baby stay asleep as well. So a lot of the time in the sleep space, you will find people immediately jump to something like settling, or does your baby know how to fall asleep by themselves? Or does your baby know how to self-settle? Or can you get them to sleep easily? And the reality is that that's actually not where we need to start. Where we need to start is way at the beginning. And one of the most important things that we need is sleep pressure. And we can kind of see sleep pressure is off when we start to see troubles with sleep, like nap refusal, frequent wakes, early wakes, all the rest of it. And it's about finding that sweet spot where if we get sleep pressure right, your baby should be able to fall asleep pretty well, and they should be able to stay asleep for a biologically normal amount of time. And it's ever changing too. So as the older your baby gets, the longer they need to stay awake in order to drive that sleep pressure up to then sleep. And then each time they sleep or nap, it kind of decreases that sleep pressure. So you have like a lovely ebb and flow of sleep pressure throughout your day that you can manage by keeping an eye on your baby's tired signs or biologically kind of normal wake windows to ensure that your baby is not undertired when you're popping them down, or, and I dare I say it because I know it's completely over dramatized in the sleep space and is actually very rare, is not overtired when they go to bed.
Yeah. So I guess like for someone who is not a sleep consultant, is it a fancy way of saying tired?
It's essentially your baby's tired, and then when they nap, they're not tired anymore. So it's a very simple concept. And I'm like, when people are going, well, my baby's not falling asleep, instead of going, well, is sleep pressure there? You could literally just say, well, are they tired?
Yeah.
And
okay,
that
cool.
would be essentially the same thing.
I have wondered this, and I guess this is why Liv asked this question. I remember when I first encountered this term sleep pressure, I was like, am I missing something? Is there like some special thing that babies get?
No.
Just tired.
No, and you'll find that in the sleep space, there is so much jargon. There is just like so many names for things, and then names for things that mean the same thing, that when you're tired and sleep deprived, you're like, what the hell? I don't know if I can swear on this podcast. Does this
say
mean
whatever you want to say, mate? Let rip. Yeah, absolutely. So many things. And I remember being like a first time mum and just being like, oh, there's like wake windows and sleep pressure and drowsy but awake and all of these terms. I don't know what any of this means.
And cruel, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And now as a second time mum, I'm just like, well, whatever. She does whatever. We figure it out. We love that perspective. Amazing. Cool. So the next question is from Anon, and they are asking, what do you think is the biggest misconception when it comes to infant/toddler sleep?
I saw this one come through and I thought there's so many different ways that I could
hard to pick one
with this question. It's really hard to pick one. But I think if we look at sleep and infant sleep from kind of an overarching perspective, I think the biggest misconception is that sleep is something that should be fixed, when really it's just something that we need to understand. Yep. We've kind of been sold this narrative, right, that if your baby's not doing certain things, not sleeping a 12-hour night, not sleeping through, isn't doing a 2-hour lunch nap, that something is wrong and we need to fix it. And the reality is your baby's not broken, you're not doing anything wrong. Neither of those things is true. It's just that we're not actually understanding sleep properly and looking at it from a lens of kind of education and support. We're looking at it from a lens of we need to fix it, which is just entirely untrue.
And the flip of that is like, if there's something to fix, it means that someone has broken something, and so it can turn that real like blame onto parents. I often like get that sense of like guilt and shame, and that sense of people thinking that they have done something wrong for their child's sleep to be wrong and need to be fixed. And so it's that like with that two sides of the coin is the like, it's you've broken it and now someone needs to come in and fix it.
100%. And I think traditionally sleep support was set up in a way that it was like, someone come to this expert and they will fix your sleep. But I want to kind of shift the perspective there. I want you to come to me so that I can educate you and empower you in order to understand and support your child's sleep. And I mean, often almost always the outcome is better sleep, but it's why you're never leading with a promise that goes, oh, your baby's 6 months old. They don't need a night feed. Oh, 6 kgs. Yeah, night wean. And, you know, come to me and I'll fix that, because our babies aren't robots. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing broken. It's just they're babies, and that's what sleep looks like. It's hard and it's broken, and they wake overnight. That's because it's normal. But I think...
And they're hungry.
And they're hungry. And I think when you shift your perspective from it's broken and I need to fix it to actually I need to understand it, and you educate yourself around that, it's like you give someone a fishing rod and teach them how to fish, right? Because then they can actually look at that specific baby over time and continue to support them in the way that they need, and tune into them to create independence. And it's why I always say to people, sleep is a long game, but the slower the change, the more lasting it is.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's such an impressive way. Well, not impressive. It's like, I just wish it wasn't so revolutionary the way that you're talking. Like, I wish that was how every new parent was spoken to about sleep.
Yeah, it's wild because, and I think we'll get into this a little bit more potentially in the next question, but it seems like there's been so many changes in parenting in general over the years, but sleep seems to be so stuck in the past.
Hasn't caught up.
It hasn't caught up, and I just at times can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah, especially with how much we now know about, like, biologically normal baby sleep. The fact that the advice hasn't caught up to what we know to be true about biology for baby sleep is wild. That we're still expecting them to do things or learn in a way that isn't gonna, isn't like gonna help or serve anyone is bizarre. But we'll move on to the next question because we can talk about it. The next question, again from Anon, is the Ferber method ever a good idea? Would it be the first thing you tried, or would you try other things first? So maybe explain what the Ferber method is for those who aren't versed in the knowledge of baby sleep theories.
Yes. Okay. So Richard Ferber was his name. He was a pediatric sleep specialist, and he developed this thing called the Ferber method. Okay. If you've ever Googled baby sleep, it's pretty likely that this is one of the most popular things that will be fed back to you. What it is, it's essentially timed check-ins. So you put your baby down awake in bed, you leave the room, and you check in on them periodically. And over time, you increase how long you spend outside of the room each time.
Yeah.
So you pop them down, maybe you say, "Good night, sweetheart," and you leave the room for 2 minutes. You leave the room for 2 minutes, and then you go back in again. You say, "Good night, sweetheart." You leave again for 4 minutes, and over time you increase the amount of time. Yeah, so essentially he published this book in the 80s, and at the time it landed pretty well. And I think that's for a few reasons. There was a massive societal shift happening at the time. There was a lot of women re-entering the workforce. Behaviorism was really dominant in psychology, and behavioral kind of empirical evidence. So for people that don't know, that's things like reward and punishment and positive reinforcement and all of that sort of stuff. That was at that time considered our best evidence. So it was kind of like this book was just published at a time where everyone was kind of rising up to this individualism idea and independence idea, and women were getting busier and life was getting busier, and people just didn't have the up-to-date knowledge yet around infant brain development, attachment, and all of the rest of it, and just hopped on board the Ferber train. I can almost guarantee that pretty much anyone that listens to this podcast, or a large percentage of them, we've had our parents use the Ferber method, because at the time that was just what was done, right?
Which is why it feels like so much of the noise is the Ferber method, because we're asking our parents for advice, and that's the advice they've got.
100%. And you can really understand from their perspective when they go, "Well, we did it this way and you turned out fine." And you can almost shift your perspective and go, "Well, first of all, I'm not fine. I'm going to therapy twice a week." But
I'm
at the same
anxious,
time,
and my attachment style is shocking.
Yeah, but at the same
super
time,
avoidant, thanks.
I know, right? And I think we'll probably have something inevitably in future where
sure.
our children go to us, oh, Mum, I can't believe you sent me to school with a stainless steel drink bottle or something. You know what I mean? But we digress. So if we look at it from a behavioral perspective, the idea with the Ferber method is that by reducing a response to a behavior, you eventually extinguish that behavior. Okay, so you're the response, you stop going in there, eventually your baby stops crying, right? And if we think more broadly about it, there's a lot of other areas where we have used previously extinction-based methods to change behaviors. In the parenting space, tantrums is one of the main ones. Yeah, timeout is another. If you ignore a tantrum, they're doing it for attention, they'll eventually stop having a tantrum. The funny thing is, in all of these other areas, there's starting to be a shift in thinking. And I can guarantee that there's a large portion of parents now that are going, okay, maybe ignoring a tantrum isn't helpful and maybe I need to help co-regulate my child. But for some reason, this extinction-based method in sleep is so ingrained and so normalized. Even now, how many years has it been since the 80s? Like 45 years later. A scary amount. And the funny thing is that he actually republished the book in like 2000 and something, 2005. And even then, that was 20 years ago. So the science on infant development has come a long way since even then, softening his original stance and going, well, actually, that doesn't work for everyone. Actually, I didn't take into account temperament, and actually other methods might be more appropriate.
Yeah.
So it's a wild thing. And I mean, babies do cry. That's just the reality of it. But crying is communication. So if we use an extinction-based approach, and this comes under the guise of many a label, right? Spaced soothing, Ferber, gentle sleep training, time check-ins, interval comforting, intermittent response, parent-led sleep coaching, sleep shaping. I actually wrote them all down because I was like, there is so many different ways that people are trying to essentially tell you to do the Ferber method. And essentially what you are doing is reinforcing your baby that crying doesn't get a response. And that's a really hard pill to swallow as a parent. And we know that responding repeatedly and consistently to our babies when they cry supports secure attachment. And we could spend an entire episode talking about attachment in general and the positive outcomes from secure attachment, stable mood, better job outcomes, all the rest of it. And emotional regulation, everything. Emotional regulation is huge. But the funny thing is if you look at a ton of sleep consultants, they're essentially wrapping up Ferber in a bow and giving it to you and saying, now pay me $650 to go and implement that. And so I guess if we wrap it around back to that question, like, no, I wouldn't consider the Ferber method, and it's not something that I use in practice. And I'm not saying that if you have ever done the Ferber method or done space soothing, regardless of if it has or hasn't worked for you, that you've ruined your child's attachment, because you haven't. Attachment is built on hundreds and thousands of different moments where we respond to our children, right? Sleep is just one of those, and it's one that I choose to prioritize building a strong, secure attachment. So instead of Ferber, I'd be looking at responsive strategies that make your baby feel safe, co-regulation, and supporting them throughout the sleep process. I don't believe in using any kind of crying in isolation, and the science now supports that stance as well.
And I guess this is a point where I jump in and say, obviously in this space, we are non-judgmental. Like, this podcast is never trying to tell you that you have done something wrong in the terms of the ways that you've parented. And Caylin is 100% the least judgmental sleep consultant I have ever come across in my whole entire life. But what is important to note is that we're being so largely sold one way, that there's only really one way to get better sleep outcomes for families. And your belief is that there's not, that there's an alternate way to doing it than what we're getting sold.
Yeah, there's multiple different ways. And it can look however you want it to look, and we can prioritize what you want to prioritize. And I'm not promising no tears and saying that I'll never let a baby cry, because that's just what they do, right? And at times I have had parents actually come to me and say, well, I want to do some sort of spaced soothing. And I'm like, okay, well, can we perhaps, which is essentially further, can we perhaps look at it from a different lens of, instead of increasing time spent out the room, perhaps it can be a quick pop out. And then when you go in again, you fill up your baby's love cup and you give them lots of input instead of just no eye contact and a quick belly rub. And you actually fully calm them down within that moment and you pop them down and then you leave again. Because what you are doing is still co-regulating your child, which is the most important thing around sleep.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you have never come across to me as judgmental at all, but I just don't want anyone in this listening to this to be like,
I know, and I am the same, and I think it's a really tricky space to navigate, and I am always chatting to people in the DMs and ensuring the content that goes out or the consults that I have, a vast majority of those have already tried some form of FERPA or spaced soothing. And the first thing I say to them is, you didn't do anything wrong, it just didn't suit your baby. Let's look at something different.
100%. Yeah. Totally. And I think something else that's quite interesting about what I've noticed about your work is that you have a huge focus on temperament, which I feel like a lot of other sort of sleep consultants I've seen don't really take temperament into consideration at all. So for those listening, would you mind giving a very simple explanation on temperament and like why that's important in terms of baby sleep?
Yeah, totally. So temperament is genetic. Your baby is simply born with their temperament, and it's how they see the world and interact with the world and how you interact with them. In the sleep space, it can be referred to with a bunch of different terms that are confusing as anything, but essentially there's a spectrum. You have quite flexible babies down one end, perhaps known as quite easygoing. You have more sensitive or less flexible babies down the other end, and your baby genetically falls somewhere along that spectrum simply when they are born. And that's something that we have to lean into when we're working with them, and especially with sleep, because temperament is the underpinning of what sleep is going to look like for you and your family.
Yeah, totally. It's interesting. I have 2 children. One of them is on one end of the spectrum and one of them is on the very other end of the spectrum, and their sleep journeys have been wildly different. And I sort of never really took into consideration that temperament might be a thing until I got one of your emails being like, hey, here's how temperament it reacts with sleep. And I was like, of course, that's going to affect sleep. Why have I not thought about that before? So even keeping me a second-time parent, learning new things about baby sleep. So thank you. Yeah, email marketing works, man. It's good.
I love email marketing. Join the list. Sign up, guys.
Yeah, actually, genuinely.
We'll pop in the show notes.
I truly will, because Caylin's emails are fantastic, and like she's so generous with the knowledge that she shares in her email marketing. Like she gives way more information than people should be paying her for that information, but she's very generous with it. But I will put the link in the show notes because it is genuinely a very helpful resource. Cool. We will move on to the next question, which is again from Anon. Currently just reached 8 months old, why is this such a tricky age sleep-wise? Sleep has gotten hard again since changing to 2 naps, but we also had sickness where we just let long naps and a later wake up time. Not convinced wake windows are correct as we are getting false starts. What wake windows would you suggest as a starting point, and then we could tweak?
Okay. So 8 months, let's break it down. 8 months is one of the hardest ages when it comes to baby sleep. And I can tell you for a fact that at the moment, the majority of the clients that I'm working with are probably somewhere between 7 and 10 months of age. It's a wild time. Your baby is beginning to understand object permanence. So they're learning that even though you might not be in their eyesight,
I forgot about this.
Still exist.
Oh no, I forgot about the object permanence thing.
Yeah.
Damn it.
So
Max is 7 months next week. No.
Oh yeah. So best you start playing peekaboo.
My gosh. I'm going to be emailing you in 2 weeks like, Caylin, help me.
So there's that, which in turn leads to a massive spike in separation anxiety, as we know. And that's wild in itself. Your baby doesn't want you to leave them, and it can impact sleep in a variety of ways. There's also a bunch of physical development going on crawling, pulling to stand, cruising furniture, whatever it may be. There's also language development going on, babbling more, all the rest of it. There's also often
and lots of like, it's like waving, and they do like, they can start to sign around. That's a lot of like communication in terms of like visual gestures and
100% that nonverbal communication is really starting to kind of show through, and they're eating more, which can lead to discomfort, and they're teething. And a lot of the time, that's when sickness starts to run wild for some reason, whether or not it's daycare or older siblings, or perhaps we just ease off a little bit on how cautious we were in the first few months, whatever it may be.
putting everything in their mouths.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also a decrease in sleep needs. So your baby just needs less sleep at this age too. So essentially, there's a whole multitude of things that
These poor little guys, man, they're just trying to get through the world, and they're getting everything thrown at them.
Yeah, no wonder they're struggling to do a 2-hour lunch nap, let me tell you.
Jeez.
Yeah. So it's a really tricky time, and a lot of it is just grit your teeth and get through it. But at the same time, there's small little things that we can do to support and make sure that we have the foundations in place so that we're doing the best of our ability to ensure sleep is well supported throughout a very tumultuous time in their lives. So the other question was around wake windows and what we do and 2 naps and all the rest of it. So the 2 nap thing, it's very normal for me at this age to see a decrease in sleep needs overall within a 24-hour period. And for those that are perhaps new to baby sleep, there was this old school idea that sleep creates sleep, or sleep begets sleep.
Sleep begets sleep, yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's entirely false. There is no evidence that sleep creates sleep. Yeah, unfortunately not. And your baby's
How many times
sleep
I've said
tank,
that?
I know. And your baby's...
I'm shilling the rumours. I'm keeping the myths going, man.
Well,
it's me.
I am the problem.
I'm the problem. It's me.
The good thing is now we know that that's not correct. And instead, what we can learn or relearn is that your baby's sleep tank is only so big. And once it is full, it is simply full. And then sleep is really hard. Okay. So wake windows are a funny thing. There's not actually too much scientific evidence behind wake windows, to be honest. I think it's more of anecdotally over time. We just see patterns with wake windows. And I mean, it's very baby dependent. If I was looking at this specific baby, I'd need to look at more. I'd need to look at their temperament. I need to look at how flexible they are. I'd need to look at their behaviors when they're awake versus asleep. If they're happy as when they're awake, they're getting the sleep that they need. I'd need to look at their sleep onset time, so how long it's taking them to fall asleep, because actually around 15 minutes is optimal for your child to fall asleep, which a lot of people don't know. And I'd need to look at sleep patterns and things like that. But if we were going to go, okay, I've got an average 8-month-old, what the hell do I do?
Whatever that is.
And yeah, I'd probably go, okay, well, around about 2 hours day sleep is the average, with a little bit of variation on either side. So if you're on 2 naps, you can kind of spread that how you want to, and it's not going to make too much of a difference. You don't have to have a 30-minute morning nap and then a hour and a half lunch nap. It can look however you want it to look. However, at times we are a little bit more strict if your baby is perhaps more sensitive to that little thing we talked about, sleep pressure. But 2 hours day sleep and around about 11 hours overnight is the average. This dreamy PM bedtime till 7 a.m. wake time is just a load of rubbish. It just makes us feel like failures when our babies aren't doing a 13-hour night. The average night, and we know this by looking at research and empirical evidence, is around about 11 hours at this age. So my first suggestion to this person would be, have a look at how much sleep your baby is having. That is always where I go to in a consult first, because 80% of the time you can get better sleep simply by managing how much sleep your baby is having. You don't even have to look at the settling or the resettling or all of that hard stuff. Most of the time, just keeping an eye on how much they're sleeping is going to be enough, because then, as you so eloquently put it, they're just tired at the right time.
Yeah, sorry, that's me coming in with some really fancy speak. Sorry if you don't understand my scientific language. Oh dear. Yeah. Perfect. Easy. Cool. So have a look at how much sleep they're having and go from there.
And false starts are another thing that people get really hung up on. Often it's a separation thing. I'm guessing it's a separation thing at this age because of the separation anxiety spike that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And it should just pass in time. I wouldn't worry too much.
And they're growing real fast, so hopefully the phase doesn't last long.
Exactly.
That's always my advice. They grow real fast.
They grow real fast. It's a season. It's a season.
You know, I hate being that person, but I'm like, it's fast, I promise. For people that don't know what a false start is, if that's a term they have not encountered, what is a false start?
A false start is when you put your baby to sleep at bedtime and they wake up after one sleep cycle. A sleep cycle is generally around 40, 45 minutes, 5 minutes. There's a little bit of variation in there, but essentially your baby's waking up within an hour or so and you're having to go and resettle them back to sleep. And it is one of the most, if not the most common sleep problem people are coming to me with.
Yeah.
It's also one of the most long-lasting phases that I tend to see in practice.
Yep. Yep. Cool. Amazing. Thank you. And then our final question, which again from Anon. There's Anon writing in so many questions. Sorry, I have always wanted to do that joke. I thought I'd see how we went here. So the last question is, a 12-month-old wakes 3 to 6 times plus per night. She was a great night sleeper until 6 months. Ever since, it's been a shit show. On top of all development and teething shit, her separation anxiety, especially at night, is so wild. She is put down in her cot approx 7 to 8 p.m. each night, and we start co-sleeping from any time between 1 p.m. till a.m. depending on the night. Currently, it's been mostly from 11 p.m. She has a dummy, which sometimes settles her, but it's mostly the boob. She's always exclusively breastfed and is a boob barnacle at night. I love that term, boob barnacle. It's so funny. She now seems to only be doing 1 day nap for anywhere between 1.25 to 1.75 hours. How can I support her to 1, need me less throughout the night, 2, sleep longer in her cot in the night, 3, need less boob in the night as it is really draining me and my mental health, so I'd like to start slowly weaning. I'm under no illusion that she won't need me in the night, but I'd love to get to a place where there's less reliance on me and also accept dad more for resettles, in brackets. Currently screams the house down if anyone other than I try to resettle her. So Caylin has very generously... I know. Caylin has very generously decided to take this question and do a bit of like a mini consult for this lovely listener. So we're going to see Caylin in action here with all of this amazing context and get some
I love it. Let's dive into
advice. Yeah.
So where would I go first? Okay, so it's a 12-month-old and that we're having multiple night wakes. There's lots of things going on here for this baby and this family. Great night sleeper until 6 months. Unfortunately, sometimes what sleep was is just something we need to let go of. Our baseline is ever shifting, and let's just kind of go, this is where we're at and this is what we're going to deal with. And I think that's sometimes quite freeing because we can get caught up in a little bit of, it looked like this before, it should look like this now. And that's just not the reality of life with kids as they grow older. So if I was to have this person come to me for a consult, the way that I work, I'm just going to share all of the trade secrets right now. The way that I work is I work to a spectrum, right? So there's easy changes down one end and there's hard changes down the other end. I always start at the easy end and then I kind of work my way up the spectrum in the hopes that I never have to get to the hard stuff, which is going to be things like your settling and your resettling. And a lot of the time we don't need to get up to that end. But we need to have all of our ducks in a row with everything else if we want to change settling. And by the sounds of things, this person here does want to change settling a little bit. So I'd be doing a little bit of a, let's look what's happening elsewhere and see if we can come up with a little bit of a plan of attack. I am missing a little bit of background information in terms of intake stuff that I'd be doing. But if we went, okay, well, let's assume environment is good. Let's assume intake is good throughout the day. Let's assume no health concerns, no red flags, no medications, no prior history of anything that could impact sleep in any way, then we kind of go tick, 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 all the easy stuff's done. We've got good sleep associations. That's all done. Then I would look at timings and sleep totals. That is the golden ticket. That is the thing that is going to get you better sleep. So at 12 months of age, average total sleep within a 24-hour period is around about 13 hours. So if we're putting her in her cot at 7 to 8 p.m. at night, the first thing I'd be asking is, what time are we getting her up in the morning? Because if we have a night that is too chunky, it's going to start chewing into our day naps. And if we have day naps that are too chunky, it's going to start chewing into our night sleep. And that is because the sleep tank's getting too full, right? So I would be going, can we manage an overnight of perhaps you're in bed about 7:30-ish for a wake between 6:30 and 7 a.m. or 7:30, 8 p.m. bedtime for a 6:30 and 7 a.m. wake. And people are going to be going, oh, but my baby has to go to sleep at 6 p.m.
But not 7 till 7.
So I'd be looking at a way that I could make your night be around about 11 and a half hours, perhaps, knowing that we can get an hour and a half lunch nap out of her, and that will then equal the average. And then I would keep her nap to an hour and a half and her night to 11 and a half hours for 7 to 10 days, because that's how long it takes for you to see the benefits of changing a routine. Sleep is a broader pattern than day in, day out, right? It's why it's so hard to figure out. You can never go, Thursday night was great, so let's do Thursday day again and get the same result.
So annoying.
If only it was that easy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be the first thing I would do in this scenario. I'd be looking at your sleep timings and totals, okay? And what you might find is that by managing her sleep totals, you start to get some longer stretches organically. If you have a baby that is perhaps a bit more flexible, down the perhaps more easygoing end of the spectrum in terms of temperament, it's highly likely. If not, then we would go to settling. And we've got a boob barnacle on our hands, right? And we want to reduce that and get dad involved. Okay, so those are two different things. When it comes to reducing boob barnacle, what I would first do is look at just once a day where perhaps you can feed and then settle to sleep without feeding fully to sleep. Now, feeding to sleep is not the enemy. However, in this scenario, I believe it could set them up well because we want dad to start getting involved. And it sounds like we need to start reducing the boob barnacle. So once a day, morning nap or bedtime, could we get to a place where perhaps we're feeding still before a nap, but then cuddling to sleep or rocking to sleep instead of feeding fully to sleep? Because then it's way easier to tag team at that point in time. And another thing that you can probably look at with night feeds is what's biologically normal in terms of night feeds for a 12-month-old. And if we look at the data, 12-month-old feeds are varying between 0 and 4, sometimes even higher per night. But if I'm in practice with someone, I'll say you can probably get down to 1 night feed. Or if you wanted to, now they're over 1, you could wean if that is something that you wanted to do overnight. So I think we could go, okay, well, let's realistically try and work down to maybe 1 night feed, somewhere at 2, 3 a.m.-ish, depending on what baby wants to do, and start reinforcing some longer stretches. Now, if a baby has been feeding for a really long time overnight, they are going to be hungry overnight. That is just the reality of it. We wake up for breakfast at 7 a.m. and eat breakfast at 7 a.m. repeatedly. We're going to wake up hungry for breakfast. It's not a bad thing. It's just the way the human body works, right? So what we probably want to do is reduce how hungry she's going to become overnight. So I would probably go, okay, well, let's look at feeds that are happening prior to midnight and maybe reduce those feeds by 50%. Time-based. So if you're latching her on and she's feeding for maybe 6 minutes, let's try feed for 3 minutes and see if we can get her back to sleep, because then we're actually just reducing her overall calorie consumption, but not expecting her to resettle without satiating those hunger cues a little bit. And you will then be able to reinforce the longer stretch. So I think there will be some of that. There will be some of managing how much sleep this baby is having in the day and overnight. And then looking at building in flexibility with your settling to sleep and getting to a place where perhaps you can settle them to sleep in your arms and transfer them perhaps a little bit faster. Sometimes that's a little trick of the trade. If your baby is assisted to sleep, but you can transfer them within 5 minutes of them falling asleep, often being in that light phase of sleep is enough to decrease that separation anxiety false start and actually get rid of it. And then I would look at reducing calorie consumption overnight in a really gradual and gentle way so that you can reinforce some longer stretches. And then in terms of dad getting involved, which was kind of the last part of the question, I would be saying we need to start low stakes when it comes to introducing a new person to sleep, particularly when it's a 12-month-old. They've been used to the same shit for a really long time, right? And it's going to be very different for them. So start low stakes, get dad to do a nap on the day that they might be home, preferably the first nap of the day, because it just feels less pressure and often it's easier to achieve, right? And then once dad's able to do a nap, get him to help with bedtime, give a feed, and then hand over and have him settle baby to sleep in his arms, however that looks. And the most important thing is to give space when you're introducing a new person to settling. And no, there's going to be tears because it's different. Everyone's capacity for tears is different. So how long you persist for doing something different is deeply personal, but also know that the optimal sleep onset time is 10 to 15 minutes. So if we're just giving dad 2 minutes to try, it might simply not be enough. Go for a walk, get a timer for 10 minutes, come back, still a shit show, rescue that and help assist. But the good thing is you haven't failed. You've just exposed baby to something new in a caring and loving way with the presence of a caregiver so that when you do that again next time, it's easier, right? And you need dad to be able to do a nap and then be able to do bedtime before dad is able to do overnight. You can't work backwards. You got to kind of systematically step your way up here. So a little bit of a roadmap there around what I would do in this scenario. Hopefully Anon feels like there's a couple of little things that they can try.
Yeah. And then also just from like my personal experience with getting dad involved in overnight settling, just like something that I noticed for myself was that like the way that I settle versus the way that my husband settles is very, very different. And so like giving them the space to figure out how they settle their baby is like so important because it looks wildly different from person to person.
It is so important. And you know what the most important thing is that whoever is that secondary settler, that they're feeling calm and they're feeling confident. And us hovering and going, hold on a second, but I hold them at 70 degrees. So that's not right.
This rhythm.
Yeah. And the song is wrong. It's actually Twinkle Twinkle.
Yeah.
That's just going to stress them out more. They're not going to be calm. No one's sleeping.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my take on that.
And I have no idea if Anon is struggling with that, but just as that's my personal anecdote and advice to anyone trying to introduce that secondary parent is that like I was a shocker at them like, no, this isn't right. And my husband had to be like, let me figure it out.
Yeah, me too, 100%. My husband was away for like 8 weeks of my daughter's first 12 weeks of life. He came back and I was like, you don't parent? Like, no, you don't know what you're doing.
None of this is correct.
I was like, but I just need to step back and give him space.
Yeah, let them figure it out. Caylin, you're amazing. You are just wonderful, and I'm so grateful for being able to come on this little expert episode and share your insight, the way that you respond to people and use your knowledge in a clear and respectful and kind and non-judgmental way is just a breath of fresh air in the space that you work in. So I'm very grateful to you, and I feel very, very lucky that we have you in our Aotearoa sleeping space, but also on this podcast. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. My pleasure. I've loved it. And thank you to everyone that listens, if anyone listens.
They will. I mean, the amount of questions we had,
I
people
mean,
will.
people are tired, right? So I'm sure there'll be one or two.
Exactly. It's so essential. It's so essential. And I'm very grateful that people can turn to you for all their sleep needs. So if you are interested in getting further advice from Caylin, you can find her on her Instagram or her website, which are both Pēpi and Parent, and I'll link that in the show notes. And she has a big, vast variety of ways that you can access her services. But also she's just a very great Instagram follow for general advice, and she does Q&As all the time, and her email marketing's great. So just follow and sign up to all the things because she's just wonderful. So, and watch this space because I'm totally getting her back for a main episode. We just need to organise a time.
And just a quick plug, I do have a free support program called Buy Support, Provide Support that is available for anyone that is out there that is a solo parent or is experiencing economic hardship and is struggling with sleep. Please flick me an email or get in contact with me and I can link you up with some free support.
That's incredible. Amazing. We love it. We love to hear it. Amazing. Thank you so much, Caylin. And I think that's it for this episode, and we'll see you in the next one.
Why do you parent like that?
Thank you for listening to this episode of Why Do You Parent Like That? Why Do You Parent Like That is created by me, your gal, Abby Harrison. Huge love and snuggles to my gorgy nephew and niece, Thomas and Francis, for lending their voices to my jingle, as well as a massive thank you to the iHeartRadio Podcast Network team for giving this little pod a place to call home. Be sure to follow our socials to stay up to date with podcast happenings, as well as chaotic insights to my life. If you have a story that you reckon would be neat to share on the pod, flick me an email at whydoyouparentlikeThatpodcast@gmail.com. Love you! Say it back.
Why do you